An Italian model was brutally stabbed to death on a balcony in Milan, and her much older boyfriend is believed to be the culprit. Italian police say he was caught red-handed in the middle of the act. We are going to be taking a closer look at this international investigation with civil rights and criminal law attorney Melba Pearson. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. People in Milan, Italy heard screams coming from a neighbor's apartment on October 14th and rushed to try to help this woman. And what they found when they busted into the unit was horrific. According to Italian news outlet Il Messaggero, 52-year-old Gianluca Soncin was allegedly caught stabbing his ex, 29-year-old model Pamela Genini, over and over and over again. Outlet Il Fatto Quotidiano reports that the young woman died after Soncin dragged her out onto the terrace of her apartment and stabbed her 24 times. And I will tell you, in a horrific twist, neighbors were able to see what was happening. They just couldn't do anything to stop it. Now, before I get into the details of what happened that night, I have to tell you a little bit more about the people involved here, okay, so you get a better sense of this. According to Il Giorno, Pamela was originally from the city of Bergamo in northern Italy. 10 years ago, when she was 19 years old, she was part of an Italian reality dating show called The Island of Adam and Eve, which apparently involves the participants competing naked. This is according to the New York Post. Il Giorno also reports that she co-founded a swimwear line with a friend, apparently worked at a real estate agency for wealthy clients in Milan. Her social media posts almost always featured her and small white chihuahua named Bianca, who, by the way, also has her own Instagram profile. And the suspect in this case, let's talk about him, Gianluca Soncin. This is apparently an entrepreneur in the world of luxury cars, according to Il Giorno, but the New York Post reports that he was actually arrested back in 2010 for fraud. He was accused of selling hundreds of luxury cars between Germany and Italy at artificially low prices to evade taxes. Now, it's unclear if he was ever convicted in that case, but the allegation, there you go. And he's reportedly very well connected in Milan, by the way, and according to reports from Il Giorno, lavished Pamela with gifts, took her on fancy vacations. Il Giorno's reporting also indicates that the two had been in a relationship for more than a year, but it was apparently a very tumultuous and violent relationship. The prosecutor's office, according to Quotidiano Nazionale, called the relationship possessive. Neighbors told Il Giorno that they would often hear fights inside of Pamela's apartment. The police have had to intervene before. The two reportedly didn't live together, but neighbors often saw Soncin there telling Il Giornale that he was quiet, didn't talk much. But it seems things really came to a head on a vacation to the island of Elba. And what was supposed to be a romantic getaway turned into a huge confrontation in which Soncin allegedly threatened to kill Pamela's dog. Remember the dog I mentioned before? So a reporter for Quotidiano Nazionale wrote, this is translated from Italian, in addition to threatening her with bottle pieces in the hotel room, trying to throw her off the balcony, telling her that he would kill her, the hotel staff had to intervene to assuage the wrath of the 52-year-old and remove him. Family, friends, they told Italian media outlets that Pamela wanted to leave this guy. But L'Unione Sarda reports that Soncin had threatened to kill her and her mother if she ended the relationship. So now I have to talk about the night of October 14th when Pamela lost her life. And to do that, I want to welcome back onto Sidebar Melba Pearson, civil rights, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, host, by the way, of Resident Legal Diva on YouTube. Hope everybody can check it out. Melba, so good to see you again. Thank you so much for taking the time. I was saying to you, I know you may not be an expert per se on Italian law, but unfortunately you are an expert when it comes to domestic violence. And domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It doesn't just happen in this country. It happens in other countries. It happens in all sorts of relationships. Talk to me about the dangers of trying to leave a relationship, particularly when you hear about these alleged threats in something like this. What are the difficulties? What are the resources, let's say here in the United States, for someone to turn to?
Yeah, so always great to see you, Jesse. And first off, I want to center the fact that this month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That's every October. So that is definitely a moment to pause and remember those whose lives were lost as a result of domestic violence, as well as those folks who are still trapped in these relationships. So, my one message, if anything, that people can take away today is that there are resources, there are people that will believe you, there are people that will help you. So, stateside, we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is a great organization. Now, unfortunately, there have been some federal cuts to funding for some of these domestic violence organizations, but they are still doing the work. So let's be clear on that, despite it might be, a bit of a trimmed down team, but they're still fighting for their mission. So you have the Domestic Violence Awareness Hotline. You have organizations like RAINN, RAINN. Again, they deal with both sexual abuse as well as domestic violence. So these are some ways that you can get support. Just be very careful in doing so. Like, for instance, you may not want to look for these resources on a shared computer. You may want to maybe go to the library or use a friend's phone or something along those lines so that you can still keep yourself safe. But Jesse, the worst and the scariest time for a domestic violence survivor is when they try to leave the relationship. That's because abusers, remember, this whole thing is about power. This is not about love. It's not about anything else other than pure, raw power. And when an abuser sees that that power is slipping away from them, they lash out often in violent ways. And tragically, that's what we saw here. So, that's not to say that you should stay. That's not the point. It just knowing that this is a very volatile moment,
Right.
it becomes critical that you find that safety and resources so that you can get out on the other side of this.
Is there something somebody should prioritize? Or maybe the better question is there something somebody in this kind of position should not do? How about that?
Well, what they shouldn't do is stay. Let's start with that, because again, in these relationships, it never gets better. It doesn't get better. So leaving is critical. I would say that it would be about engaging law enforcement if you're comfortable. So that way you can maybe tell the officers that there's a situation and maybe they can do extra patrols past your home. Definitely tell your neighbors and friends that, hey, listen, if you see anybody lurking around my apartment or the job or anything like that, please call law enforcement. And I think what also another thing survivors should not do is stay in silence, because again, there's that embarrassment that comes like, oh, I don't want people knowing my business and this and that. But if folks don't know that you're in danger, they may ignore signs that could have enabled them to, again, reach out to law enforcement if they saw your ex lurking in the parking lot outside of work, rather than you come outside and then there's a horrible confrontation. So I think telling people is something that is very critical that survivors should do, not suffer in silence.
By the way, you know why we're able to bring you stories like this? It's not only because of the amazing support that we get from all of you out there, and thank you so much for that, but also it's because of the support that we get from our incredible sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. You know why they're so big? Because they win a lot. They have recovered over $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. Think about that. In the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. Out in Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. You get another client in Pennsylvania that received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. Soncin allegedly stabbed Pamela 24 times. You know, we always talk about how stabbing is typically considered a very personal crime. What does that number of wounds tell you? What does it tell you about this suspect? What does it tell you about this crime?
Pure anger, pure rage. How dare you leave me? How dare you, try to assert your own power? I'm you belong to me, and it again, just because of the number, he was clearly in a rage. Now, this does not take away from intent, because granted, Italian law is very different in terms of how they phrase things and, potentially the sentencing. But the mindset is still the same in terms of he went to that house with the intention of killing her. And it was exhibited when he tried to kill himself afterwards to escape accountability. So that number of stab wounds shows, again, that rage, that anger, and how dare you try and leave me? You're my possession.
Let's talk about the details of this attack that night. It is disturbing, but Pamela's ex, who's been identified by Quotidiano Nazionale only as Francesco, was on the phone with her, apparently. And it's unclear if they were texting or they were actually talking to each other, but Pamela reportedly told him, according to L'Unione Sarda, "I'm scared he's got a duplicate key, he's broken in, I don't know what to do, call the police." Now, Francesco did just that. He contacted law enforcement. They rushed over to the apartment, and when the officers got to the apartment building, they had to be let into the building. So Il Giorno reports that they buzzed Pamela's apartment, number 33, and that is when she did something really interesting here. So she responded on the intercom saying only Glovo, which apparently is a delivery service in Europe. It's similar to Uber Eats or Instacart. That's what we seem to believe it is. And there's speculation that Pamela was actually trying to let them in without alerting Soncin, right, to what was going on. Now, according to Il Giorno's reporting, she wasn't able to get to the buzzer, tragically. But Melba, that's very smart, and I'm wondering if that's something you've seen before.
Yes, absolutely. Because let's say if you're on the phone with the police, you have to play it off that, hey, girl, do you want to meet up for coffee or this and that? You try to play it off so that you're not alerting your abuser and they don't get that opportunity to try to snatch the phone away from you and break contact or to harm you in the process. Because maybe, at that point, you have the person at bay and you're able to now try and get help, get a call out. But by saying, hi, police come here, that could aggravate the situation and escalate it. So sadly, victims are in this place where they have to de-escalate while trying to find a way to get out and get safe. So
Right.
my heart breaks that she was not able to get to them in time.
Now, the agents here, they ended up breaking down the door to the building, racing up to her apartment, and they burst through the door. And what did they find? They find Soncin reportedly stabbing Pamela repeatedly. So they rush over, they try to stop him, and he allegedly stabbed or sliced at his own neck. Okay, he was rushed to a hospital. He survived. Pamela, though, she was pronounced dead inside the apartment. A full-scale investigation was launched. Forensic teams were going over everything inside the building, as well as Soncin's car, which was parked out on the street, according to Il Giorno. An autopsy is expected to be completed next week. And Il Giorno also reports that Francesco went to the scene to speak with police, took Pamela's dog, the Chihuahua, home with him when he left to make sure that she was cared for. Melba, as I say this, on its face, it seems like a pretty open and shut legal case, right? Police say they broke in, they watched the stabbing. What is the investigation really? What kind of evidence do they need to collect from a forensic point of view? I mean, what answers are they looking for?
I don't know if it's necessarily answers per se, but just because of the fact that it would be open and shut, that, oh, the officers saw what happened, doesn't take away from, number one, securing any evidence, right? So whether it be the knife, whether it be clothing, all of that, so that forensic evidence could come in to play at trial. Also, trying to, let's say, if he took the phone away from her stateside, for instance, in the state of Florida, and this is where I spent my prosecutorial career, denying someone of the phone or denying them the ability to call 911 is its own separate charge. So those type, so recovering the phone could be important from that perspective. And, again, if there's any other evidence in terms of showing that the two of them had a relationship, maybe there's photos that might be laying around, something like that, again, to establish that the two of them had a relationship, because, again, I'm comparing stateside, the defendant doesn't have to speak. So you may want to get more of those kind of contexts and circumstantial evidentiary kind of information into play. So that could be
Right.
part of it. And of course, an autopsy to show that the manner and means was homicide. Again, the visual would do, but there might be certain predicates that the court would require.
Now, Il Messaggero reports that Soncin spent one night in the hospital. Then he was transferred to San Vittore prison, where he's reportedly being kept isolated from other prisoners. Prosecutor Alyssa Menegazzo, who works on cases that deal with gender-based violence, per Il Giorno, charged Soncin with murder, the aggravating factors of premeditation, stalking, femicide. This is according to the New York Post. And the Post also reports that in Italy, femicide refers to the killing of a woman due to gender-based motives or domestic violence. Multiple outlets report that Soncin has exercised his right to remain silent, not saying anything to investigators or the magistrate during his first court hearing. This is per Il Messaggero. A court-appointed lawyer, Simona Luceri, told reporters on Thursday, 2 days after the stabbing, he's not in a very lucid condition. He has already appointed a lawyer with whom he will decide the procedural strategy. He is not yet fully aware of what happened. Now, Melba, here in the States, we would talk about competency, right? We would talk about, does he appreciate, actually the criminal process? Can he assist in his own defense? Does he understand the charges? You also wonder insanity. Do you appreciate the wrongfulness of your crime at that time? Could you distinguish between right and wrong? Could you conform your actions to the law? I briefly looked about whether or not insanity is a potential defense in Italy. It appears to be. I can't 100% confirm it, but talk to me about, generally speaking, is that actually a viable defense in a brutal domestic violence situation like this? Yes, it's a horrible crime, but the idea of, this happening, was doing it, allegedly doing it, police come in, seemingly was still trying to do it. You do wonder if mental health is going to be the only defense for a defense attorney.
I mean, listen, I'm thinking stateside, everyone is entitled to a defense. They're not necessarily entitled to a good defense or a winning defense, but they are entitled to a defense. And so, if mental health is what they have to try and move forward with it, that's about, I think that's probably the most viable of them all, because, the argument could be that, well, he has, had basically a snap from reality, just like a temporal break in terms of, something happened, maybe it's schizophrenia, maybe it's, something along those lines. But again, it would be a stretch, especially if he hasn't had a prior history of, mental illness or mental breaks. Is there anyone who can testify that, this is something that happens to him when, I don't know, he drinks too much, or if he's under stress or whatever. But again, I don't think it's viable that it's going to be winning, but it is something that the defense can argue.
Now, the judge who saw Soncin during this first hearing, it's called it's basically like a preliminary investigation judge. He was the one who determined whether Soncin should remain behind bars pending trial. And in court documents that were reviewed by Il Messaggero, this judge said that Soncin has reportedly made threats against other people, like Pamela's family, that he might be inclined to target Francesco, right, Pamela's ex. And by the way, her ex, Francesco, according to Quotidiano Nazionale, will likely be a key witness in the prosecution's case because he was one of the last people, the very last people, to speak with Pamela. The outlet reports that after he and Pamela ended their relationship in 2022, they remained good friends. He claims she confided in him about what was going on with Soncin, which means he can provide a lot of insight into what Pamela apparently said happened. Now, Francesco told the news outlet that Pamela was often the victim of violent beatings where Soncin would allegedly threaten to kill her. His translated statements include, quote, about every 20 days there were episodes of physical violence. Now, Francesco also claims that earlier this year, Soncin went to Pamela's mother's home, sent Pamela a video to prove he was there. Soncin allegedly said, if you leave me, I'll kill her. Melba, from a legal point of view, I'm not sure if that would be considered hearsay in the United States, but and whether or not investigators can use it for verification, but it's definitely an important part of the story.
Absolutely, because in a way, he's an ear witness in terms of he may have heard the beginning of the attack in terms of, oh my gosh, something's happening at my door. He's breaking down my door, something like that. And that would be admissible just in terms of the excited utterance, in terms of she, talking to her, speaking to her state of mind in that moment. And so, yes, he's going to be an absolutely critical witness, and the majority of his statements will come in. And And of course, it can be corroborated by law enforcement that ended up, breaking down the door. But what the defendant here is classic domestic violence tactics in terms of threatening family members, threatening the family pet. That's often one where, the defendant may, or the abuser would then, knowing that the victim loves their pet, try to harm them as a way of hurting or controlling their victim. Same thing with children. So, again, there's so many different tactics abusers use to try and keep that control and that power over the survivor and keeping them in fear.
Now, when officers, they searched his home, Soncin's home, they found multiple weapons. This is according to documents that were reviewed by Il Messaggero, including 10 knives, pistols. Alyssa B., this is Pamela's friend and business partner who started the swimwear line with her, posted on Instagram that Soncin was, quote, crazy, and that she was devastated that she wouldn't be able to grow old with her friend. She also spoke with news outlets about Pamela's relationship with Soncin and her efforts to get her away from him. Il Messaggero reports that she said, and this is translated from Italian, yesterday we were at lunch in Lugano. She wanted to talk to me because she was going to study psychology at university. I had to explain to her how the online platform of the university worked. She was very happy. She was going to be an aunt, and that made her very happy. With Gianluca, the relationship seemed to have stabilized, and maybe this was a mistake, giving confidence to a person who did not want to do good. She was undecided whether to report him. I don't know if she did. Melba, what do you take away from that?
Just heartbreaking. Again, I mean, the friend was there and tried to support, and I know that the friend must be just beyond devastated and wondering if there was something else that she could have done to try and help her friend and save her friend. And the reality is, she probably did the best that she could. I mean, no one has a glass, a fortune telling type ability to know the future and know that, oh, if I do this, it'll prevent this. So I hope that she rests in the fact that she did the best she could for her friend. And again, I just, my heart breaks for everyone involved in this situation, because that is such a tragic loss to see a life cut short in such a horrible, brutal way.
And if the allegations are true, I mean, it's a situation that, and I say the allegations are true, if they're true, I mean, the evidence seems pretty straightforward, but based on the reporting, but it's a common situation, and it is difficult for people who are around others in domestic violence situations. When do you step in? How do you step in? Who do you report? Is it your responsibility to? Do you just counsel the best that you can? It's a difficult line, right, Melba?
Yeah, it is difficult because you're concerned that, wait a minute, if I call and report, is that what my friend wants? Am I now placing myself in the middle of something and I could become a target of the abuser's anger? So there's a lot of things to think through. And of course, everyone has to make the best decisions based on the facts that they know at that time. And if you're worried about your safety, maybe you take a different tactic. Maybe you have those uncomfortable discussions with your friend, as in, what do you want me to do? Because you don't necessarily want to step further than what the person wants to do, but you should always do your best to support them. Let them know that no matter what, you're never going to judge them, that you're always there, because isolation is another key tactic that abusers use. So letting the person know, no matter what, I'm here for you, I think is very critical, so that the victim, when they want to step in and ready to step into survivorship, they know that they have resources and there's somewhere they can go.
Melba Pearson, thanks so much for coming on. It was great seeing you.
Great seeing you, Jesse. Take care.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.